Hello students, this is Professor Durant and I want to help you through some of the particulars of how to submit your SQ3R activity. As you know from your reading and from our PowerPoint, SQ3R is a reading system and it helps you approach your reading in a more academic way so you have full comprehension, so your retention is better. It helps you through more difficult material. I have this article up, and this is not the article that you're using for class, but this is one I'm going to use for demonstration purposes. So this article is Neuroscience Helps to Explain How Students Learn. The first step in SQ3R is survey. And the survey step, as you know, is to help you activate your schema, what you already know. It kind of helps your concentration and focus so you can start to shut out any distractions that are coming into your mind. It helps you think about what you already know and to synthesize that information with the new knowledge. And so the survey step is an important step. You should survey everything that you read. If it's just a quick look through, a quick glance through where you read titles, you look at pictures, anything that kind of catches your eye. You don't do a full reading or even a partial reading on the survey step. It's just a quick glance through to, as I said, to help you start thinking about the topic. So you're not reading something cold. So let's look at that, how to do the survey step and demonstrate it. Now typically you are not going to do this when you read. This is just for demonstration purposes for me to know that you understand the process of SQ3R. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get my highlighter. I'm just going to choose yellow. So you see I just went up to my toolbar and I chose my highlighter. And I know that I'm always going to read the title of anything before I begin to read it. So it's Neuroscience Helps to Explain How Students Learn. I am in particular very interested in student learning. I read all I can on this topic. And this was done in 2012. And 2012 is fairly recent, so I like the most recent information. It's exciting to me how much neuroscience is changing what we know about learning, how to help people learn more effectively. And then probably later I'll go up and look up Dr. Bruce Johnson and see who he is and see where he comes from, etc. And so they give me a little graphic, and it kind of just shows me a little bit of a brain, etc., and some learning things, a formula from math, etc. And so when I begin, I'll see that I know an introduction is always kind of, there's an attention getter, there's just a general kind of idea to kind of get me involved. And I might look at that, just glance at it, like many students believe that learning has occurred because they completed an activity, such as reading, and by acquiring information, they're able to learn something. That's interesting to me because we know that sometimes people just go through the motions and they never actually learn something. You can go through entire classes, entire years of school, and never actually learn something. Just go through the motions, turn it in. So what does learning actually mean? I keep trying to think of this. Also in a survey, I'm also always going to read the subtitles, neuroscience and learning. I am interested in that. What is neuroscience? To give me a little definition, I might glance at that quickly in the beginning. And they read through it, study of development, structure and function of the nervous system, with a special focus on the brain and its role in behavior and cognitive functions. That means how I'm thinking. All right, I got it. And so I'm looking through this. And, what does this mean? How students can utilize neuroscience. Very interesting. So how can I make this directly applicable? Theory's all well and good in my mind, but then I want something that's very usable. So be engaged in the process of learning. Again, I'm still just doing survey, so I'm just glancing through this very quickly. I don't want that, so I'll just erase that. Help your brain make connections, etc. So I go through my entire reading, and I will highlight to demonstrate my survey step in SQ3R. As I said, I want to reiterate that you don't do this typically when you're using SQ3R. So sometimes students get a little bit discouraged, or they're like, what? This is like takes too much time. You're typically not going to do this. This is just for the purposes of the assignment and demonstration. So the next step is the question step. Typically, you just write questions directly into your textbook. Conversely, if your professor provides questions for you in the form of a study guide or, reading questions, or if the textbook provides questions for you, perfectly fine to use those as questions. Questions are great because really what you want to start thinking about is, how is my professor thinking? What can he ask me about this material, etc. So to demonstrate this in your assignment, I'm going to ask you to use the review step in Word here. And so if you go up here and you press review, you can press comment anytime you want to write in a question. Let me demonstrate that. For instance, neuroscience helps to explain how students learn. So I'm going to ask myself, is this concrete information or just theory? So how can neuroscience teach us more about how to learn? So I've got my questions there, and I'll continue through. I want to balance my questions throughout my entire document, my entire reading that I'm working on. And so I'll go through neuroscience and learning, so what's the connection there? I want to ask questions on all levels of Bloom's. If you open the cover of your textbook, The Confident Student, you'll see a graphic there that will show you the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So we know we just don't want factual questions. We want questions that will go into the higher levels of learning, like evaluation is the highest level, of course. And so we'll ask ourselves about, like, is this important for me in particular? Can I, or we ask applications, can I apply some of this knowledge to one class or another, math, etc. And so I keep going through, and let me show you again how to add in a question. So how can students utilize neuroscience? Be engaged in the process of learning. There's a question. So how can I be more engaged? Because I have a tendency to just knock out my assignments, get them done. I'm a very busy person, but I want to be more engaged without perhaps taking more time. So then I've done the question steps. So I've done that throughout my document. I've just done a couple there for demonstration, but you're going to go throughout your reading and create at least 6 questions. So then I've done survey question. Now I'm into read, recite, review, the last 3 steps. So in read, I'm going to chunk up my reading. So I'm going to put it into smaller chunks, and then I'm going to go through. And then the next step, of course, is recite. And recite is something that you do generally out loud to yourself. And so, or just kind of, in your own head, you're sub-vocalizing a little bit. And so what that means is I've read a section. Let's say I've read this section on, I'll just read this like it's a section right here, neuroscience and learning. So I'm reading this. As an educator, I'm always interested in discovering more about students' perspectives and the manner in which learning occurs. The goal is to increase my instructional effectiveness so that I can better assist students as they participate in the knowledge acquisition process. Many educators emphasize the need for students to demonstrate that learning has occurred. This includes the use of critical thinking skills or higher order cognitive processing. However, what are the mental processes that actually occur while students are actively learning? What makes critical thinking possible? So this is an introduction. So that I read it. So then my recite step is I say in my own words. I look away from what I'm reading. I say in my own words to myself what I read. So they're saying about, it's interesting, and of course it's written from a teacher's perspective, and the teacher wants to understand not only that, our students can take a test and perform on the test, but what are the, what skills are they using? What kind of thinking skills? What kind of processing skills, with what happens in their brain while they're learning? And so this is a step beyond understanding of asking my students questions and they give me the right answer. So I say all that to myself to demonstrate that I comprehend. Okay, so then I've gone to, I understand what I read because I can say it in my own words. So those 2 steps, read and recite, I'm not going to ask you to demonstrate in any way here because I don't think it's, it seems feasible to do so. So I'm just going to trust that you're going to go through that and practice it as if you were actually doing SQ3R. Now the last step of SQ3R is review. The review step, so students often will finish their reading and they think, oh, finished with my reading, done. But reading really goes beyond that. Now what am I going to do with it? If it's a textbook like The Confident Student, this is a pretty simple textbook to read. They've got a lot of graphic aids in there, visuals to give to students, charting, etc. They put vocabulary in the margins. And so this is a book where if I'm going to review it, and in the review step, I want you to get your head around this. What you're doing is you're taking the material and you're reducing it to study material. So in the review step, I could just annotate. I could highlight what I think is important there. You know, oh, my teacher always asks things about vocabulary. I know I'm trying to build that jargon for that discipline that I'm becoming more involved in. So I highlight that. I might make notes in the margin, etc. I take that book to class with me. I open it up during lectures and mark it and whatever the professor emphasizes. That might be enough for my review step. Or maybe I'm a person that I like to write flashcards in my review step. So I create those study materials, condensing that knowledge. Going back and rereading the chapters is not an effective study skill. It is condensing it the first time, fully understanding it. Often I have to revise that. So, or you can write summaries for material that you read. There's a lot of different things that can happen in the review step. So what I decided that I would do here is to write just a linear outline of this. So I'm just going to come to the end of my document. You could do it at a separate document if you like, and I'm going to write an outline. So of course it's going to be neuroscience helps to explain how students learn. And so I'm going to go Control C, and I'm just going to and I have to flip back and forth. Now, if I had both my screens on, I'd probably just put it on both my screens. So I'm just going to save it like that. So that's the title of this, and then I'm going to make a linear outline. It doesn't have to be formal, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect or anything like that. You can just do it with bullets. And so in the first thing, they give me a little introduction. And so I like to always look at the introduction because as someone who writes, I want to know how people bring someone in, how they begin like a big piece on this. So I go back and look at the introduction. It's frustration sets in. I read this a little bit. The field of okay. So they talk about knowing when you learn something, new material. What else do they talk about? How neuroscience helps us understand learning. And so then my next big place that I'm going here, so that was mainly my introduction. And so I go back, and when you're wanting to subordinate points is neuroscience and learning. That is my next one. And in there they'll give me a definition. So if I'm looking at that, then my next major topic is going to be neuroscience and learning. If I can put things in my own words, I'm much better off. And so I'm going to tab over because I'm subordinating information here. And I'm going to tab over. And what are they telling me about? Well, first they're giving me this definition. But I want to put this definition in my own words. This is important, okay? Because if you just copy things, this isn't demonstrating knowledge, okay? Because if you need to be able to put it in your own words. So sometimes I have to read something 2 or 3 times before I can really get my head around how I would say that. The study, development, structure, and function of the nervous system. Special focus on the brain and its role in behavior and cognitive function. So neuroscience is what I'm going to say for the purposes of this is neuroscience is how we learn, but focusing on how the brain thinks and processes new material. So I've kind of put this in my own words. Sometimes I'll have to go back and I'll adapt because maybe I've been too simplistic and I've left something out. So I'll continue on with this outline and I'm just tagging it right on the end of that. So if I've completed my whole SQ3R now this way, really this should take you about an hour. It shouldn't take too long to complete this. So I'm going to file and I'm going to save this, and I'm going to save it as my I'm just going to put Durant because I always want to make sure I label all my stuff. SQ3R Activity, and I'll put it into my UNIV 113 folder, and already I got my scavenger hunts in there, so I'm good to go. And so I'll just go back into activities and submit that assignment. So I know that's been a bit longer than I anticipated, but I hope that it helps you a little bit understand how you will complete this activity. If you have any questions, again, please just email me. Bye now.